Hi everybody, Golden Era Bookham here, and in today's video I want to take an evidence-based look at something that's been causing a stir in the fitness and health community: Liver King's Whole Feast protein powder, made up of beef protein and organ powders, especially because it is promoted to be sourced from the pristine environments of Sweden and New Zealand. There have been claims circulating online, including a YouTube video by John Bravo, suggesting that some beef proteins from Whole Feast may not be sourced where they are marketed to be. John Bravo asked for Derek from More Plates, More Dates to analyze the alleged list he provided on his video, but I know that Derek is a real busy guy right now running his own company, so I contacted John Bravo and he told me to use his video and the list he provided to analyze, as I am an actual scientist with a PhD in biochemistry and can provide a proper, unbiased scientific assessment. I cannot independently verify the claims that John Bravo has made, so I am not presenting them as fact. However, this video and its purpose is to raise a broader and very important question. What are the potential risks, if any, associated with consuming beef protein powders, organ supplements, or ingredients such as sweeteners and additives from the listed countries? Now, I want to be crystal clear here from the start. This video is not intended to make any accusations against any individual or brand. The purpose here is to explore the scientific and regulatory landscape of beef protein supplements, particularly when they are sourced from various countries, such as the United States, India, Argentina, and of course New Zealand and Sweden. We'll also be looking at whether there are any risks associated with the additives that are allegedly contained in this protein powder. That's what we'll examine today, using published scientific studies, regulatory data, and comparative sourcing practices from around the world. This video is more about consumer awareness and scientific literacy, and I'm not necessarily targeting individuals or brands. I'm just repeating that, and sure, I have to be careful by what I say, as I don't want to get sued, but more on that later. So first, let's look at the list of ingredients and country of origin of each given in John Bravo's video, and I'll briefly give my concerns with these before we deep dive into the scientific evidence behind the potential risks. Now, if we look at the lists of ingredients and country of origin, we have protein and organ powders. We've got grass-fed protein isolate from the US. This is all from John Bravo's video, of course. And it does say grass-fed while weather permits, not grass-finished. I'll get to that later. Not administered hormones, but antibiotics. Health and welfare of the animals is left to the individual farms and veterans. Colostrum powder, Indian origin, grass-fed. Desiccated bovine heart powder, US, origin from grass-fed animals raised in Argentina. Okay, bizarre. Desiccated bovine liver powder, US origin from grass-fed animals raised in Argentina. So that's kind of really weird. US origin from grass-fed animals in Argentina. Okay. Desiccated bovine, which one is it, Argentina or the USA? Desiccated bovine spleen powder, US origin from grass-fed animals raised in Argentina. Desiccated bovine pancreas powder, US origin from grass-fed animals raised in Argentina. Desiccated bovine kidney powder, same thing, US origin raised in Argentina. Desiccated bovine bone powder, New Zealand origin, grass-fed. Desiccated bovine blood powder, New Zealand origin, grass-fed. Now we're going to go into the extras that are in there. So this is not beef or organ powders. Now we're looking at the additives that are allegedly in this protein powder. L-leucine, product of China. Alkalized cocoa powder, product of France. Cacao powder, product of France. Natural vanilla frosting flavor, product of the USA. Himalayan pink salt, product of Pakistan. Monk fruit extract, product of China. Reb A stevia leaf extract, product of China. Natural bitter masca, product of the USA. Anti-foaming agent, product of the USA. Natural chocolate flavoring, product of Canada. Natural French vanilla flavoring, product of the USA. And natural butter flavoring, product of the USA. All right, so that's quite a lot of, countries listed here with all these ingredients, okay? Now, I have to admit, most concerning for me is not necessarily all of that. It's the alleged omega-6 to omega-3 ratio that is stated in John Bravo's video, which is in the range of 14 to 1 up to 20 to 1 of omega-6 to omega-3, which I admit is inflammatory. It is pro-inflammatory, right? So having gone through all these allegations made in John Bravo's video, I would now firstly like to dive deep into the topic of how the origin of beef protein and organ powder can affect the quality of protein powders and specifically the potential risks to human health. Now, let's get into why there are issues with consuming protein powders from different origins, as in from different countries, even those that are said to be grass-fed from the USA or sourced from the USA. Essentially, not all proteins are created equal, and the same can be said about organ powders. Different countries have different standards, regulations regarding the welfare and practices regarding beef, and this is a fact. If indeed whole feast protein powder is originally sourced from New Zealand and in Sweden, as is shown on their website, then the protein powder would be considered of superior quality. However, if not, then there are potential risks to human health in consuming beef protein and organ powders from the countries such as USA and India. Here again is the list provided in John Bravo's video. Now let's look at the data and see why protein and organ powders from Sweden and New Zealand are considered superior to those beef and organ powders sourced from Argentina, USA, and India. As we can see here in the table provided, you can see this table, but I'm going to actually explain a little bit more detail. So, grass-fed beef from Sweden has a very, very low and favorable omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. And I'm going to go through why a little later. But it's just 1.5 to 1, indicating a favorable balance that supports anti-inflammatory effects in the human body. The production practices in Sweden, the cattle are typically raised on natural pastures without the use of hormones or antibiotics, and there are strict animal welfare standards. And this ensures high quality meat products are produced. And contamination risk is rather low due to the strict environmental and food safety regulations, right? So this is why, especially when it comes to proteins from Sweden and even Europe, because the regulatory standards are much higher than the US and other countries, they are considered superior beef proteins, right? The same goes with New Zealand. Omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is 2 to 1, and that's pretty much a healthy fatty acid profile. Again, production practices, cattle in New Zealand raised year-round on open pastures without the use of growth hormones or antibiotics, and again, they have very stringent animal welfare regulations ensuring high-quality beef products. And again, because of those reasons, and again, strict environmental food safety regulations, so you have low contamination of things with like heavy metals, etc., that we'll go through later. If now we look at proteins, even grass-fed beef protein sourced from the USA, the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is still pretty good. It's still very good, actually. 1.5 to 3 to 1, right? That's kind of 1.5 to 1 to 3 to 1. That's kind of the range, depending on the specific farming practices. Still very, very good. The production practices, though, can vary. Some producers adhere to strict grass-fed protocols. Others can supplement their cattle with grains or use antibiotics and hormones. So here's where we start seeing some of the issues with grass-fed beef. It is not truly pure grass-fed beef. Regulatory standards, well, the USDA provides guidelines, but enforcement can vary, and that's the issue. They are not strictly adhered to these guidelines. Again, here we run through with some issues. The contamination risk is moderate due to the variability, again, in farming practices. So this is where we start going into a bit of a gray area. It really is difficult to say what kind of quality protein you're getting from grass-fed US beef cattle, right? So beef cattle. Argentina, grass-fed beef, omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, very good, 1.2 to 1, indicating a very favorable balance. Argentinian cattle are mostly entirely grass-fed and raised on very large-scale ranches where they graze freely. I've been to Argentina and I've seen it. It's usually very, very good beef there. Again, regulatory standards. There are established guidelines, though enforcement can be variable. Here we again can say that there could be some issues that could be faced with grass-fed beef from Argentina because people don't necessarily, so the people that are raising the cattle do not necessarily adhere to these guidelines. Again, contamination risk, moderate, much like the US, and it depends on specific farming practices. Now we start getting to the more, not so favorable beef protein isolates. For example, those from India, right? Let's be honest. The issue is that the data is limited and people do not necessarily follow regulations there. But because data is limited, for example, there's very little information on the omega-6 to omega-3 ratios. Cattle are raised on mixed diets. And I mean, I'm telling you, I've seen it on the streets of India. Cattle are everywhere, eating everything from garbage to newspaper. So again, very, very hard to say how that's going to affect the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio or contamination. But you can start making up your mind there. Production practices. Sure, cattle are typically raised in small-scale operations, but there's varying feeding practices, as I just mentioned, and that's because the regulations for meat production are not necessarily enforced and people do whatever they want to do. And for that reason, there's higher potential risk due to variability in farming practices. Well, that's what I wanted to say regarding beef protein and its source and how it can actually affect the quality of the actual final product. In conclusion, Sweden and New Zealand grass-fed beef is often considered superior due to their stringent farming practices, absence of hormones and antibiotics, with low and favorable omega-6 to omega-3 ratios in the range of 1.5 to 2 to 1. Their protein isolates also reflect these high standards, offering clean, nutrient-rich options. In contrast, beef proteins from the US, Argentina, and India can vary significantly, as the cattle could be raised with antibiotics and hormones, especially those from the USA and India. Further, heavy metal contamination could be another source of concern, as heavy metals have been detected in beef protein sourced from the US. This makes it essential for consumers to research and select products from reputable sources that adhere to strict grass-fed and processing standards. Now, given that the majority of the protein and organ powders used in whole feast is alleged to be sourced from the US, there are a list of potential antibiotics and heavy metals that could be found within, which would then cause one to raise concerns regarding the potential toxicity of such protein powders. One of the main issues with the allegations made is that the protein, which is said to be sourced from the US, is not pure grass-fed beef. that is not grass finished, which means it could be a grain-fed beef, and further, it's not certified organic, and this causes a lot more problems. The following slide here that I've prepared, you can see the US policies and practices regarding the antibiotic use in grass-fed raised beef cattle. As we can see, unless the beef is actually labeled as being sourced from the American Grass-Fed Association or certified organic, antibiotics can be used to raise the cattle, raising concerns about antibiotic contamination. So, what does this all mean? Well, firstly, let's look at all the antibiotics used in US beef cattle, which are of some concern due to the potential harm, and these include the following: tetracyclines. And these of course, all of these antibiotics are used in the prevention of diseases, right? We've got macrolides, beta-lactams, sulfonamides, aminoglycosides. It's all with sides, right? Side means to kill, by the way. That's what these antibiotics do. They kill microorganisms, right? And so, sure, they are used to kill diseases and potential infections in cattle while they're being raised. But what is the risk for us humans? That's the question. Do the antibiotic residues found in beef protein isolates cause or pose any potential risk to human health, like the ones listed? Well, unfortunately, the answer is that antibiotics found in beef protein isolates can potentially cause disease in humans by contributing to antibiotic resistance and other health issues like disturbing the gut microflora, which of course then affects your immune system. The overuse of antibiotics in livestock can potentially lead to antibiotic residues in meat products, increasing the risk of resistant bacterial transmission, allergic reactions, and other toxic effects, as we can see from all these publications, of which there are many of. Further, there is concern for heavy metal contaminants in US grass-fed beef protein isolates. Even though grass-fed beef is considered a cleaner protein source, protein isolates derived from beef, whether grass-fed or not, can still be contaminated with heavy metals during processing, packing, or due to environmental exposure. Here listed are the most commonly reported heavy metals along with the health risks that are associated with each of these. Lead, for example, the health risk associated with lead is neurotoxicity, kidney damage, and developmental issues. We have cadmium, of which the health risks are kidney dysfunction, bone damage, and is carcinogenic potential as well. That is, could cause cancer. Arsenic, skin lesions are a health risk associated with arsenic, as well as cardiovascular disease, and of course increased cancer risk. Mercury, neurological effects are reported, particularly with methylmercury. Aluminium, neurotoxic effects in high doses. It's a possible contributor to neurodegenerative diseases. And all of this is summarized, as you can see in this table, along with the source of where these heavy metals could be found. And yeah, this is, of course, a concern. But what is the actual risk, and is this risk substantiated? Well, as a scientist, it is my job to give you the entire truth and present the facts. It is well established that many protein powders, especially those from the USA, have been found to have detectable levels of heavy metals that are associated with human disease. However, does heavy metal consumption from protein powders pose a risk to human health? Well, a 2020 study published in the Toxicology Reports titled A Human Health Risk Assessment of Heavy Metal Ingestion Among Consumers of Protein Powder Supplements investigated just that, whether the presence of heavy metals specifically arsenic, cadmium, mercury, and lead, which I've listed, in protein powders poses a health risk to consumers or not. The key findings: detection of heavy metals, definitely. The study did confirm that protein powders, many of them, contain detectable levels of heavy metals. Detectable levels, with plant-based products generally exhibiting higher concentrations than animal-based ones. Yeah, that's a very important point that was made in this study. The risk assessment, now this is where it really matters. Using the US Environmental Protection Agency's reference doses and screening levels, the researchers calculated hazard quotients for each metal and a cumulative hazard index for overall exposure. All products tested had a hazard index below 1, indicating no significant non-carcinogenic health risk from typical consumption levels, that is 1 to 3 servings per day. Lead exposure. The study employed, again, the EPA's adult lead methodology to establish blood lead levels resulting from protein powder consumption of 1 to 3 servings per day. All estimated blood lead levels were below the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's guidance value of 5 micrograms per deciliter, suggesting minimal risk from lead exposure in these supplements. Then again, it's hard to trust the CDC too, but I'm just giving you the full summary of this study for you to consider, right? How much do you trust the government? That's another question. Product variability. Weight gain protein powders actually showed much higher hazard index values, primarily due to increased arsenic and cadmium content, whereas whey protein powders had the lowest hazard index values, indicating lower heavy metal contamination. So what does this all mean? Well, in summary, the study concludes that despite the presence of detectable heavy metals in protein powders, the levels found do not pose a significant health risk to consumers when these products are used as directed. However, the variability among products underscores the importance of manufacturing practices and ingredient sourcing in minimizing heavy metal content. So, I mean, what can we get from all this? Well, again, do we trust the government? Do we trust this study 100%? It's hard to say, But in general, what it's saying is that there are detectable levels of heavy metal, but according to these agencies, they are not necessarily posing a risk to human health. So, you want my opinion? Well, I would just be aware of that, and you can make your own decision regarding, protein powders, because we're not just talking about one particular protein powder here. This is a phenomenon found in many protein powders. Okay, this is very important to understand. This is what this study is showing. Protein powders in general, you're going to have detectable heavy metal concentrations in there. And there is a high likelihood, if it's not stated that in the ingredients list that your protein is not organic, from a certified organic source, that the beef protein that is used there is likely to have been raised with antibiotics and even not be grass-fed, could be grain-fed. And this is where I think, in my opinion, is the biggest issue with the allegations made regarding whole feast from Liver King, right? In my opinion, although antibiotic residues and heavy metal contaminants can be found in grass-fed US beef protein powder, and especially, antibiotic residues could cause an issue. They could disrupt your flora. They could cause antibiotic resistance. To me, the biggest concern personally is the alleged omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, which is alleged to be in the range of 14 to up to 20 to 1 as a ratio. Now, as we have seen, true and pure grass-fed US beef protein has a very favorable omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. However, John Bravo's video states that the protein powder is sourced from grass-fed beef cattle when weather permits and not grass-finished. This means that the source of beef protein could be contaminated with grain-fed beef. Now, the issue with grain-fed beef is that the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is reportedly much higher than compared to grass-fed beef, up to 20 to 1. This is because grains are higher in omega-6 fatty acids, while grass-fed cattle, due to their diet, have a more balanced ratio of omega-6 and omega-3. Now, this begs the question then, if the allegations regarding whole feast protein are true, then how much of the beef protein powder from US origin is actually grain-fed and not pure grass-fed beef? Because according to John Bravo's video, the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is through the roof at 14 up to 20 to 1. This would suggest that a high amount of US grass-fed beef protein in this product was grain-fed. I should also state that although offal meats like liver and heart generally have a relatively low omega-6 to omega-3 ratio compared to some other common meats, they could also potentially contribute to a higher omega-6 to 3 ratio in protein powders that contain organ powders. Now you might be asking, what's the big deal about omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in beef protein and in one's diet? Well, the ideal omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in one's diet is in the range of 1 to about 4 to 1. However, a typical Western diet has a ratio of about 20 to 1 or higher, which can lead to chronic inflammation. Excess omega-6 consumption can trigger the body to produce pro-inflammatory chemicals, potentially contributing to chronic low-grade inflammation and later disease. The current ratio is often attributed to the widespread use of vegetables and seed oils, which are high in omega-6. Foods with a high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, something in the range of 20 to 1, can contribute to inflammation and include refined vegetable oils like corn, safflower, sunflower, grapeseed, soy, and peanut oil. Other sources include nuts and seeds, mayonnaise, salad dressings, and some processed foods. Of course, one could argue one could shift the balance of omega-6 to O3 in one's diet by making conscious decisions about eating foods high in omega-3. And so, to put things in perspective, it is important to note the saying, the dose makes the poison. And so, if you are eating foods with a high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio all day long, then yeah, it is not going to be good for you. So this allegation, to me at least, is the one that I would be most concerned about, because some people do consume protein up to 3 times a day or even more so. And if the allegations again are true, then this would be, at least for me, the biggest concern. Now I would like to finally assess the flavorings and additives that are listed in John Bravo's video. So here's an evidence-based assessment of the potential health risks associated with each of the listed ingredients and their countries of origin. L-leucine from China. Well, China in the past has been faced with heavy metal contamination in agricultural products. They faced many challenges along this line due to industrial pollution. So, however, leucine used in supplements is typically produced through fermentation and undergoes purification processes. Looking now at alkalized cocoa powder and cacao powder from France, cocoa products can accumulate heavy metals like cadmium and lead. Again, this is published. Depending on the soil and where cocoa beans are cultivated, France tends to import cocoa beans, and the final contaminations levels depend on the source of these beans. But European regulations set maximum levels for these contaminants, so there's, less potential risk associated with these particular ingredients. Natural vanilla flavoring from the US. Natural vanilla flavorings in the US are subject to FDA regulations and must meet safety standards. Himalayan pink salt from Pakistan. Studies have detected trace amounts of heavy metals, including cadmium and lead, in Himalayan pink salt from Pakistan. Monk fruit extract and highly purified stevia extracts are considered safe by the US FDA and are classified as generally recognized as safe. Natural bitter masker and anti-foaming agent from the USA. These are used to improve the taste of products, generally considered safe from approved sources. Natural chocolate flavoring from Canada, subject to Canadian food safety regulations, which are quite stringent, so these flavorings are also considered safe. Natural French vanilla flavor from the USA, similar to other natural flavorings. This is regulated by the FDA and is generally safe for consumption. Natural butter flavor, again, commonly used in various products to improve the flavor and are generally considered as safe. So, in conclusion, while most of these ingredients are considered safe when sourced from reputable suppliers and used within regulatory guidelines, it's essential still to be aware of potential contaminants and processing practices. But all in all, the additives and alleged origins, in my opinion, are not of a major concern. Again, the dose makes the poison, and these additives are not going to be in great amounts in these protein powders. In conclusion, based on the available scientific literature and international health reports, it's clear that not all beef protein or organ supplements are created equal. Factors such as sourcing practices, regulations around antibiotic and hormone use, animal welfare, heavy metal contamination, potential antibiotics and hormones use in raising beef cattle, it all varies widely between countries. I've presented the potential risks associated with ingredients that are listed in John Bravo's video. Protein supplements sourced from countries like New Zealand and Sweden often have more stringent agricultural standards, raising the quality of the product, while those from India, Argentina, or the US may be more variable depending on the producer. If indeed beef protein powders mostly contain protein and organ powders that originated from the US, I would be cautious for the potential health risks that could occur with its consumption. Further, if you are concerned about the additives and sweeteners that are added to the protein powders, prioritize products from manufacturers who adhered to strict quality control measures and provide transparency in their ingredient sourcing. Be aware that they may also present potential contamination. Again, I want to reiterate that this video is not accusing any specific person or company of misrepresentation or harm. Instead, we have discussed about the potential risks drawn from peer-reviewed research and public health guidelines to help the consumer make the best decisions for their own health and well-being. Now, that is just a legal statement to prevent me from getting sued for making this video, but you know what? Let's get real here. And let's not be naive either. Sure, there are legitimate concerns around sourcing, quality, and potential contaminants in various protein and organ powders, especially when ingredients are derived from regions with inconsistent regulatory oversight. It's important, of course, to assess each product critically, regardless of branding or marketing claims. But regarding Whole Feast and its creator, Liver King, he has publicly admitted to misleading his audience about his steroid use and has referred to himself as a scam artist in the recent documentary Untold, The Liver King. He has also spoken openly about a criminal past which included involvement in activities like counterfeiting and drug trafficking.
Primals, I'm making this video to apologize. because I fucked up, because I'm embarrassed and ashamed, because I lied and I misled a lot of people. I also made drugs because I knew how to turn my apartment into a fucking chemistry lab. I used to print money, a lot of it, and it all worked.
Based on these public admissions and considering the seriousness of these statements made by the Liver King himself, I personally, would be hesitant to trust the claims made about his products, including Whole Feast. That's just my opinion. As always, I encourage you to do your own research, consult independent lab testing where possible, and make informed decisions about what you put into your own body. At the end of the day, transparency, third-party testing, and a solid track record are what matter most in the supplement industry. And in this case, the red flags are, in my opinion, worth noting. So that's my scientific assessment of the allegations made about Liver King's Whole Feast protein. And if you like the video, I know it's been a long one, but if you liked it, then please give the video a like, subscribe, and leave me your comments. Would you like me to do more videos like this, to actually use my scientific expertise to assess products or dive into the science behind exercises? Or what about the science behind steroids and what they actually do to your body? Please let me know in the comment section. Understand, I'm a biochemist, so I can talk about all these different things. Finally, if you want to dive deeper into the historical, physical culture, history of bodybuilding, or explore my coaching programs, please visit www.goldenerabookworm.com. That's it from me. This is the Golden Era Bookworm saying, stay strong, stay educated, and always question what you put into your own body. That's it from me. Bye for now. Head to www.goldenerabookworm.com for the biggest range of classic old school bodybuilding books as ebooks, e-magazines such as Iron Man and Reg Park Journal, high quality bodybuilding posters of the Golden Era stars, merchandise and classic gymwear featuring Steve Reeves, Marvin Eder, John Grimmick, Reg Park, and many other Golden Era stars. For those wishing to build a classic physique, lose fat, and build muscle, online training is also available. Collectibles such as rare autographed photos from the Golden Era stars are also available, and to collaborate, please get in touch. Now, if you're interested in learning more about Vince Gironda's approach to bodybuilding, his principles, and all these tips of wisdom that he has, I mean, there's so much stuff that probably hasn't been proven by science, and it will take science to prove or disprove Vince. But to be honest, these 3 books, I believe, which I call the Classic Physique Bundle, are the best books that Vince ever came out with. And they, of course, are the Wild Physique, the Master Series, and the Pro Series. Have a look at it this way. The Wild Physique, I believe, is like the ABCs of Vince Gironda's principles to bodybuilding. He teaches you the exercises and his principles. But how do you put them together? Well, the Master Series is a 14-month program of using all of these principles, all of the diets that Vince came out with, all of the exercises. And of course, the Pro Series was a book that he came out with later on, specially targeted for getting into competition. It's just these 3 books, as I call it, the Classic Physique Bundle, are Vince's best work, and available, of course, at www.goldenerabookworm.com.